be glass blowers. They're out there trying to make a well, they're out there trying to like make something while they're learning, and so they're not really concerned about their price points as much as those of us that are like doing it for a living, and so just with all these glass blowers, and it just felt like a race to the bottom for a long time. Like pieces that I used to get $30 for, I'd struggle to get 20 for now, and so I guess I hope that with legalization, right around the corner, that it kind of balances out all the new glass blowers and the lower prices, that the demand will start to pick up and kind of make up for the increased supply.
This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. Hey, what's going on, Quinn? Welcome to the show.
Hey.
How the hell you doing, dude?
Oh, another day, another 100 million.
Yeah, man, I feel you, dude. It's been a long time coming. You and I have known each other for quite some time. Back, what was it, Glass X that you were slinging some glass for, and I was selling some. I guess I sent off some production to you guys, and you guys ended up picking up my little pigs that I was making at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I was trying to think, like, before that, like, where the hell did we actually meet? Was it a class we took together, or was it?
I
was trying to remember if it was an old distributor, like an old company I worked for, because it's been quite some time.
I most of my connections back then I got off of that Talk Glass forum. So that's how I usually assume I met people along the way. But honestly, I honestly don't remember. It was all kind of a blur. When I was on the road, I had a lot of different territories. I was pretty much on the road nonstop. I would go home for like a couple of days at most and then go back out for a few weeks.
Hell yeah.
And when I was on the road, I was constantly trying to find glass blowers in my area, wherever I was going to be, because one, I could help them out by buying their glass, and two, they could help me out by giving me a place to stay.
Nice.
So it was mutually beneficial, and I really didn't want to try to stay a place if I wasn't going to be able to help them out, and so since I had buying power, it usually worked out for everybody. But yeah, I generally found most of the glass blowers back then, at least, on Talk Glass.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if it was a company, because I worked for a company called Monster Glass back in the day. I helped them get a studio set up, and I remember Glass X rolling through one day, and they bought a bunch of stuff, and I don't remember if maybe you were there with them. They were over in Clearwater at the time here in Florida. Or if maybe I was up in the Carolinas and I ran into you there. I don't know, dude, but either way, I'm glad we met each other, because I know we talked about Frisbee golf a lot and stuff
right
outside of glass. It's always fun. But before I get too far off the rails here, if you want to get us started though with just giving us your superhero origin story and how you got introduced to the flame.
Sure. Well, so I live in Asheville, North Carolina, which I'm sure a lot of you know is kind of a glass blowing mecca on the East Coast. We have easily 200-300 full-time pipe makers here. We have 3 to 5 distributors operating at any given time. We have 15 to 20 different head shops. We've got a lot of glass here. So I was in college. I was doing the typical college space cadet acid head thing, and basically we'd eat a bunch of acid and wander around downtown, and one day I came across this glass blower named a Carrion. If you've heard that name, you're probably already getting angry, because a Carrion has burned lots and lots of bridges over the years in the glass community. So basically, a Carrion had made a deal with a local head shop called Octopus Garden, where he believed they would buy everything he made. Unfortunately, he would make, and to this day, I've never found anyone that made them faster, but he would make inside out little spoons in 6 minutes. Like, just crank them out. He'd take a big piece of 50, flare it, draw the inside, spin it up, burn it in, like good quality in literally 6 minutes apiece.
Wild.
So it was crazy. Like to this day, I've never met anyone that can make them as clean and as quick. Like I got to give him that. Um, so Octopus Garden was like, what the fuck? Because he would show up with hundreds of these things like every other day. And they're like, we can't buy all of these. He's like, well, screw you. I'm going to sell glass right in front of your store. So he started slinging glass like literally on the sidewalk in front of their store. and, and so I met this guy and I'm like, wait a second, you make these? He's like, yeah. Well, I'm like, dude, I got to see that. You know, like, I'm like, can I like give you some money, like smoke some weed with you, something to like let me check this out? He's like, oh yeah, come back to. So he had this like little hovel trailer with this like horrible shed that like leaked everywhere, and he had a GTT Phantom and an F-130 and was cranking out decent class, honestly. So long story short, this guy was a lunatic. I wanted to learn to blow glass. I was going to school for lighting design for like theater and venues and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'd rather do this. And so I was like, well, maybe I can make some money and like pay him to teach me. So I started buying glass from him and then selling it. So I would buy cases of glass, run around downtown and sell them for double what I paid, and made decent money. And then when the time came for me to like approach my parents and be like, hey, I'm gonna do this instead of college, they were like, I don't think so. And like met this guy and they were like, no, he's a lunatic. And he proved it by like sending my parents emails like threatening to kill them and all this crazy shit.
Jesus.
Yeah, so a carrion, he's a character. He's faked his death 3 different times. A carrion isn't his name. He's an illegal immigrant from Canada. Like it's all kinds of crazy. So anyway, he fucked off out of Asheville because he owed too many people money and didn't want to end up in the river. So he left Asheville. So I kind of was like, whatever. And I don't really have the glassblower around anymore. I guess this isn't going to work out, and kind of had a bad taste in my mouth after carrying. He ended up stealing like 2 or 3 grand from me, like DVD case full of a bunch of like software and DVDs and stuff and like a camera and all this stuff. And so I kind of was like, I guess that's just, not going to work out. And so a couple years later, I'm walking around downtown and I see a guy selling glass and he's got a table set up. And, when I did it, we didn't have a permit. We had good running shoes,
Right.
like, so to see a guy out there with a table, I'm like, oh shit, like this dude must be like somewhat legit, so I start talking to him and, yeah, it's Jeff Pieces. Everybody knows Jeff Pieces.
Nice.
So
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so I met him and I'm like, dude, like I used to know this crazy glass blower and like I miss hanging out like in his studio. Like, what can I do to like hang out in your studio? Like, I want a couple pieces made. He's like, oh yeah, I know a carrion, blah blah blah. He had, the typical carrion experience that everybody's had. But he's like, yeah, man, he's super chill. We're both from New York, and so he's like, yeah, come back and hang out. And so I go out to his place and he's literally got an easy up with tarps draped down the sides of it and like extension cords run out to it and like a couple of box fans and like a natty 3A or 2 natty 3As sitting piggybacked on top of each other with like a big tip on one and a small tip on the other. And that's what he's blowing glass on.
That's
and
awesome.
It was incredible. To this day, I still say Jeff Pieces should make his glass blowing name Easy Up because damn, what a good name,
Right.
like perfect origin story, So anyway, Jeff and I became fast friends. I would do the same thing with him where I would buy glass off of him, run around downtown and sell it. And I saved up. I got, by the end of the year, I had 3 grand saved up. I was ready to use it to buy my equipment. I bought the worst torch ever, a mini CC. It's terrible. I bought a small kiln, bought, regs, all that. And right when I was ready to set up, Jeff moved to the beach. So I had nowhere to set up. I was like, damn it. So he had shown me Talk Glass, the forum. And so I was like, you know what? I can't set up right now, but I can learn. So I literally read every single post on that forum twice. I went back to the oldest post in every single like thread or whatever and read them from when that forum started until that moment and did it twice. Did it over the course of like a few months. I became the most boring person ever to hang out with because all I would do is read these forum posts while people were sitting in my house. Um, so I made a deal with my parents that if I continued to go to college and graduate, that they would build me a shed to blow glass in um, once I graduated. So I did, and they did. I set up my equipment up there. I started blowing glass, started making little pendants and shit. Um, they told me that I could not make pipes and that I must work a full time 40-hour a week job in order to continue to use that space, which I did not think was going to be very conducive to learning a new trade, that it would not be enough time, you know? And so I was like, you know what? I figured it out. I sold my oxygen concentrator, I sold my kiln. I had a friend drive up from Asheville to pick me up, drove me back to Asheville, and I just started couch surfing. I immediately rented space in a studio and then just started going from couch to couch while I was trying to save up money to find a place to live.
Hell yeah.
Um, yep. So I was in a studio, Snoop's studio, actually. Lots of people know Snoop. I was in Snoop's studio, and Noah, the owner of Glass X, came in and we started talking. And he's really personable. Like if you're even remotely like connected to the glass industry and he comes across you, he wants to know your story. You know, so he started talking to me. I told him my story, and I guess he liked the sound of it. And he was like, "Well, you know, I could put you on the road, blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "Dude, if I can do anything, it's fucking sell glass, man. Like I've been doing that shit for years. I can sell glass better than I can make it, you know." And
Yeah.
so, yep. So that's how that all started. So I started working with Glass X. I was doing, I was going up and down the East Coast. So I would go up to New York. I'd go up through, you know, Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania. I'd go across to New York, and then I'd come back down the other side, do a little bit of Ohio, West Virginia, and then I would go down and I would do Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and I just kind of like alternated. Um, and that was super fun, honestly. Like I said, I really like selling glass. Like that is definitely one of my favorite things to do. I'm a huge glass nerd, you know, so I really like to talk about it. The head shop owners, a lot of these, they didn't know anything about glass, you know, and so I really enjoyed educating them. You know, I met tons and tons of glass blowers. You know, it was one of those things that I was really really grateful to be able to do when I was young. You know, when I didn't have a family, didn't have mortgage or anything to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
It was really nice, you know. Um, but it's not, you know, the best way to make a living. There's a lot of expenses when you're on the road. You know, hotels and stuff. It's really expensive. It ends up being, you know, averages out to like $120 a day just to exist on the road.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, you know, you're making, you know, your cut of what you sell. And if you have a bad day, you can only go to, say, 3 stores in a day, maybe 4 if you're lucky. And if you have a bad day, if you hit a bunch of China shops, whatever, you know, you can definitely come back and owe money. You know, you can definitely come back and not have made anything for that week or two you're on the road. So that you know, kind of made it tough. And I you know, I wanted to blow glass more. So I decided to kind of stay home and just kind of blow glass on my own. And I did that for a little while. I started to work security for music festivals in the summers. And that was awesome. That's a great way to sell glass, believe it or not.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
Oh my God. Yeah. You go to a festival with a bunch of $20 frit spoons and you will leave with lots of money.
Yeah, we used to walk around with oneies and frit spoons in our fingers.
Right, right, right. Especially when you're working security, you know, no one's going to mess with you.
Yeah.
So it worked out really well. So I did that for a little while. And then I ended up coming back from being on the road for a few months working security in the headshot or the studio I was renting space in. She decided she wasn't going to do the studio anymore, and she was going to rent space in one of the studios here. And Asheville has a bunch of like decent studio space that you can rent in. So it's like, I imagine a lot of other places the best option is to have your own studio, but here in Asheville there are so many places you can rent that honestly a lot of the time it's better to just spend the money and not have to deal with like hauling oxygen tanks and all that shit.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
And plus the camaraderie that you have amongst other glass blowers, and there's
yeah,
definitely benefits.
it's a lot easier to push yourself, when you got. people to push you,
Yeah.
But anyway, so her studio was shutting down, and I was still waiting on my paychecks to come through from working security. So I ended up in a position where I had like 5 days to make rent and did not have any way to do it. So I had to sell my torch, unfortunately. And that was rough. So I had to sell my torch. I got a job delivering the newspaper here in Asheville. Um, but the good side of that is I started to read the Wall Street Journal every day and got into stock trading and took, that delivering the newspaper job is honestly one of the best paying jobs I've ever had. As crazy as that sounds.
Oh no, my dad did it for
Um,
a long time. He managed one of like the routes for the
yeah, that's
areas,
what I did.
and they all
I
made
had
great
like
money.
I had a single copy route, and I ended up, I was making 800 to 1,000 a week just to deliver the newspaper 3 hours a night,
Yeah.
and so I invested a bunch of that money. I ended up getting a new torch and started blowing glass during the days. And so I was blowing glass during the day and running the newspaper at night. After a while, I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try to blow glass and quit doing the newspaper. So I quit the newspaper, and I realized that money was a lot nicer than I thought it was, and was like, shit, I need to get some actual paycheck coming. And so I got a job at one of the head shops here in Asheville. And this was the smallest head shop. It was actually originally started by Noah from Glass X. Him and his girlfriend at the time started it. When they went their separate ways, Shannon kept the store. So I went to work for Shannon. And it was great. I really, really enjoyed working at a head shop. It really felt right. After being in literally every part of this industry. Before I blew glass, I collected it. I worked the trade shows. I worked as a distributor. It's just after being on every part of this industry, it felt right being in the head shop, being able to educate the consumer. Like I'd
Oh yeah.
educated tons of shop owners. Now was my chance to actually educate the consumer. And because I have this wealth of knowledge about glass, I was a very, very good head shop employee. Good Lord, could I sell some glass,
Yeah,
And
I'm sure.
my gosh, and so I did, everything in my power to keep that store going. But unfortunately, um, in a town with a 10-ton gorilla like Octopus Garden, they got raided by the DEA, got all their stuff taken. 3 days later, they're open again with their shelves full. Like no one has any idea where all this glass came from because they
Jesus, yeah,
got
it's
it all
crazy.
taken. It was all gone, and then 3 days later, they're open with all their shelf stock. We're like, what the? Where'd that come from? It didn't come from us,
Yeah,
Like
that's
no
wild,
one
huh?
knows. So they have 11 stores in town, and so with them in town, it was quite difficult to continue to be the bootstrapped, but we were 100% local. We didn't sell any Chinese glass, nothing. We had tons of local art. We did a lot of consignment stuff from local artists. We really were a force of good for the glass community in Asheville. We're proud to have done it. Unfortunately, it did come to an end. Shannon sold the store to another small head shop chain in Asheville. They focus more. We didn't sell any tobacco products. They focus more on like roll your own tobacco, and do sell a bit of Chinese glass, which kind of hurts, honestly, to know it's being sold over there. But what are
Yeah,
you gonna
yeah,
do?
yeah,
What are you
exactly.
gonna do?
Yep.
So unfortunately, with the store closing down, I had to go get a real job again. But I have my studio 100% set up. All I got to do is move my kiln out there, and I will be blowing glass, hoping by the end of today I will have a flame from my torch and a hot kiln in the corner.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for you.
I am very excited. It's been way too long.
So to kind of back up a little bit with the first Carlisle you got. So like I remember back in the day when I was trying to find my first torch, I got a minor bench burner because that was what I was working on. I was working on that or a national, going back and forth between the two. And so I bought the minor bench burner, and for me it was a great little learning torch. It was $160, for a torch, and it got some glass moving, but it wasn't a lot. But I was still like, I got to a point where I was still making like small bubs on it and stuff.
Oh
That
wow!
took me like 3 hours to make.
Yeah,
Wrapping rakes kind of shit. But I was still doing it, But it was such a soft torch that it really made me work slow and like learn the material. I couldn't rush it. Like you jump on a GTT and it's like, even nowadays I get it. I'm not used to the GTT still. I'm used to them with solid work, but with hollow it's a whole nother situation. But then I jumped up to my Carlisle, like the regular CC, and it was like, still it's a nice gradual slow burn, but it still has more surface area. With that, with the Carlisle Mini, was that just like a surface mixed flame? Is that what all that thing was?
Yeah, it's their version of the minor.
That's what basically. I figured.
Yeah, it's their version of the minor, but I swear it is colder. Like, so I went from my Mini CC. All right, let me think of the progression here. I owned the Mini CC. I actually, when I was living at my parents', I briefly went to the Midwest and worked with a glassblower out there for a couple months. While I was out there, I sold my Mini CC because I was working on his Scorpion, the GTT Scorpion, which I really liked. It was tiny, like the torch itself. It looked like a toy. It was so small, but it actually put out considerably more heat than that Mini CC did. So I went from that to I bought a Red Max, which has the minor on top, and that top flame was so much hotter than that Mini CC, so much hotter. I don't understand. Maybe, I just didn't know what I was doing, whatever. Sure, I'm open to that. But, oh my gosh, I need to work on one again. Now that I know what I know, I need to put my hands on one again and see if it was just me not knowing what I was doing. But that thing, it was like I swear like a butane lighter puts out more heat than that damn Mini CC did. Like, it really was the coolest torch I've ever worked on. Like, it just did not put heat into glass, like, at all. Like, I really felt like I kind of slowed myself down by getting that torch out of the gate just because it was just so bad. Like, I don't know. But I got the Red Max. The Red Max did a lot better than I'd worked on Carlisles at that point. I did not like that the premix gobbled up my striking colors. I liked that I could burn the haze off, but I had to be so careful not to destroy them in the process. And so I didn't like the premix center. So I liked the Red Max more than the CC. But once I got a GTT, it was over. That's the end all be all for me. And granted, I've never worked on a Herbie, and I can understand how having that like fluffier flame can be nice for some things. It feels like maybe like a Phantom mounted on top of like a 75 mil Herbie would be like the ideal torch, but
that's a lot of heat.
Yeah,
Jesus.
That Mini CC certainly was not. That much I know for sure.
Yeah, man, the Herbie's weird, dude. I used my brother's a couple years ago when I went and saw him in Colorado, and I've never used one before, and I've seen him used. Like I took a class with Joe Peters and Peter Moeller about 10 years ago, a little less than that. But seeing Peter using his and seeing like just him able to do his little threading stitch work on like his little voodoo dolls and stuff was just using that center. Just you couldn't even see the flame, kind of thing. It's just incredible. So I jumped on Jared's torch, and I was just like, it was the most intuitive torch I've ever been on. Like it was just
really
instinctually natural for me to use it.
Wow,
it was wild, man. Like just be able to rotate and go in and out of the flame settings and stuff.
Right.
It was super strange, but what I found is that I couldn't get it hot enough, and I've heard that from some people. Is like they're saying like it's great for all kind of stuff, but it's not like the hottest torch compared to like Mirage or something like that. So, but it's interesting. But yeah, so I'm the same way, man. Because I've been rocking my Carlisle for 21 years almost now. I guess it's been.
Sure.
But I've been using the Mirage at work, and I had to learn it while I was learning and making a new character I'm doing. And it's a big, solid piece of glass. I kept getting devid issues, and it's just all kind of, it was just pissing me off. And I just, I
Right.
eventually figured it out, But recently I was making some ornaments there. I had to do a tree topper for a guest, and I used my Carlisle at Magic Kingdom to make the tree topper. Went to Mexico at Epcot where the GTT is to make some smaller versions of it, and I just made a sloppy fucking mess. It was, it's so funny, dude, because like I make fun of the guys I work with because they've all been working glass for 35, 40 years, solid work. You give them a piece of
Right.
tubing and it's like they're lost with it.
Oh yeah.
I felt like that. I felt like I was one of them trying to make these little tiny angel things. It was weird,
Right.
but it's like anything else. After a while, you get used to it, and then there's the pros and cons. Everybody has their benefit. The Carlisle is great for fuming, but like you're saying, like you get the reductions on color. It sucks.
Right.
I'm always using my
Right.
hand torch to try to burn off some of the haze, and certain stuff.
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
I want.
But unpopular opinion. I prefer my Phantom over Mirage. I have worked both. Okay, so I make frit spoons, right? That's what I've been doing. That's been my bread and butter for the whole time I've been on the torch. Frit spoons, right? So that's like my I time myself on them. I know how long they take.
Mm-hmm.
So on a Red Max, it's like 21 minutes. On a Mirage, it's like 16, 17 minutes. On my Phantom, it's like 11, 12 minutes. Now, the difference is with my Phantom, I can make a flame that is a millimeter or two bigger than my center without having to run my outers too small.
Mm-hmm.
With the Mirage, I cannot get that mid-range flame. And I live in that mid-range flame. That I run that mid-range flame more than anything else because it's the perfect size for heating and stretching and like when you're working with a small frit spoon. When I work the Mirage, I end up just fighting with this hissy ass loud outer trying to get it smaller so that I can get that mid-sized flame that I'm so used to.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like the right perfect width of the width length of your tubing and everything. You're not
Right,
worrying with
right.
your blowpipe's not getting sloppy on you and shit.
Right, and I feel like the Mirage is just too big, and like people have asked me like when are you gonna upgrade to the Mirage? I'm not, I do not think that's an upgrade, and I think people kind of do newbies a disservice when people are like, hey, I've got, $1,500-$1,600 to spend, what torch should I get? And people always try to push them towards the Mirage because, quote, you'll upgrade to it anyway in the future. You'll want it in the future anyway. And it's like, no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Having worked on both of those torches, I absolutely prefer my Phantom. If I had $1,600 to spend, I would buy a Phantom and a nice ass Marver. I would not buy a Mirage with it.
If it's a newbie, I tell them to buy a National. Put the money in there.
Right. Give them, make them appreciate that GTT when they finally get it.
Yeah, because I mean, how many times have you seen like these, post, GTT for sale, faces melted off, basically?
Oh my gosh,
kind of thing.
Yeah, yep, you're not wrong. Nope, the Red Max lives for beginners, man.
Yeah.
I really think that's the perfect beginner's torch.
Man, I've seen some people make some crazy shit on Red Maxes. Like, not even fathomable to me the size and pieces that I've seen made on those torches. It's incredible.
Man, if you're patient, you really can. Like the whole thing of the Red Max is it's just not efficient. It just puts a lot of heat out into the air,
Yeah, exactly.
instead of into the glass. But if you're patient, you can make some awesome stuff. What I used to do when I had the Red Max is I would crank both flames and then put out in front of it and flare, like using both flames. So the big flame would be more towards the middle, and then the top flame would be on the outside edge. And I would flare using both flames. And, it took a little while because it wasn't very hot, but that was a big ass flame I was able to conjure up out of the thing. But I mean, like, compared, like, because everybody compares the Red Max to the Lynx as far as, like, beginner torch. They say either get the Lynx or get the Red Max if you're trying to spend, $400, $500. And granted, I have a hard time with that one, honestly, having worked on both, So, like, here's a story. You know Levi down the road from you?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so Levi, when I first met him, he was running on a Lynx. And I had a Phantom, so I was very familiar with the Lynx, And so I was like, oh, yeah, dude, awesome. We can make all kinds of stuff on your Lynx, Like, that's my center flame. I'm totally like, yeah, I can do, we can make all kinds of stuff. I realized that, so when I run my Phantom, 90% of the time when I turn my outers off, I leave my oxygen on the outers.
Mm-hmm.
And it does so much to that inner flame. It makes it less it makes it more like a laser. It focuses it more. It puts a lot more heat into it. It really it like supercharges that inner flame. I did not realize how much having that outer just to put the oxygen onto the links. I did not realize how much that increases the abilities of the links until I worked on a standalone links. Like he's got pictures on his Instagram of that piece we made. Oh my gosh. Like still looking back at it, I'm like, oh, I don't really want my name connected to that one. Like because it's just you can tell that it we had a good plan, but we just couldn't get enough glass moving at once to make it happen.
Right.
And honestly, in that moment, I was thinking about how a Red Max would be able to do it. It would take it a while longer to like heat, but you'd be able to get that large mass of glass hot at once, you know?
Yep.
Um,
Oh yeah, totally.
so yeah, I struggle with the what should a newbie spend $400 $500 on? I struggle with that one because I definitely see the Lynx as the more generally more capable torch. That laser, that tiny little hair width flame you can't get anywhere near that on a Red Max, and that was always my issue with the Red Max was I couldn't get the surface mix topper narrow enough and still hot. And you absolutely can do that all day with the Lynx, but as far as heating like a larger amount of glass, I think the Red Max has the Lynx beat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It makes sense for sure. Yeah, I know what you mean though, man. Like getting into projects, like where in your head you're thinking like you can see the glass moving and making this big
Right.
shit. And for me, it's like my brain gets stuck into the hot shop where I'm like making this big stuff on on the furnace, and it's different glass, the whole process. But in my brain, I'm doing the same thing on my torch. And I remember years ago, I was making these like jellyfish lamp shade tops for my buddy's bar. And I was like, oh yeah, in my head I saw myself like I had the whole everything down, like I had fucking steps and like some bricks set up for myself so I can actually stand up tall on and have my torch all set up. It was just like this whole thing. And it was middle summertime, it's nice, like 100 fucking degrees outside in Florida, and
Right.
I could not get this glass to flare out as big and wide as I wanted. And I was using like 55 mil or 52 or some shit, and it just
Right.
wouldn't move like I wanted it to. And it's frustrating, but it's just funny, like where our brain goes to, like, oh yeah, I can do this, and
Oh
we're
yeah.
just like
No.
limited by technology.
Oh, or limited by for me my hands. Like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, like I can look at like Jason Lee just put out the zipper tech.
yeah. How fucking cool is that shit, right?
Dude, so the first time I looked at it, I'm like, witchcraft. It's fucking witchcraft.
Yeah.
And then he put out that Chillum just the other day, and he's got it in the bull push, and I looked at it, and it fucking clicked. And I was like, oh shit, that's how he does it. And I got so excited, I turned to my wife, I said, look, you see this? This is how he does it. Like, because I figured it out. I know there's no way in fuck I'd ever be able to make my hands do it, but I know how he did it, like...
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember years ago he did a video just showing him doing his wigwags, and it was like it was like a sped up video, and
Right.
we all like recorded it and then slowed it down to kind of see the tech. And I was like counting his process and every wig and wag, and he has like a mathematical equation and kind of figures out how he's making his pattern, so it's all like really pretty and looks nice, and works in like 3 5 7s in terms of how many wigs and stuff he has going on.
Right, right.
But I was stoked that he did that because he's been such an innovator in the industry for so long. Like when the staircase tech came out and people and like the overlays and the double layer wig wags and all this other window shit he's doing, everybody's like, what the fuck? Because
Right.
like back when I started doing this shit, I had to go to smoke shops and I'd see stuff that were like checkerboard patterns and mosaic patterns. Like there was somebody that was, I don't know who it was back in the day making this stuff, but it was just, I was completely just mind blown by it. And I would go home and try to figure out, are they laying the color down first and then doing like an outline, filling the grout in a sense in, or like are they doing the grout first and then filling in the color? And
You talking about those frit scratch guys?
I don't know. They weren't really frit scratch. It was like literally it was like a mosaic pattern. Like it was like puzzle pieces all put together on a pipe,
Huh.
But they weren't like in a puzzle shape. They were just like random kind of different pieces. But there were some that were like checkerboard patterns, that like a dot box,
Right.
kind of situation.
Right. No, that's what made me think of the frit scratch guys was they used to do a lot of checkerboard stuff, and it blew my mind because they would have like 3 or 4 colors.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what they would do is they'd lay the frit and they'd scratch it back, and they'd lay frit in behind it, and then they'd scratch it back. And having done that, I have a lot of respect for that because that is not easy to get precise, because you're working against the clock the whole time, so you have to do it hot,
Yeah.
and yeah, that is not easy stuff. It's one thing to see it and go, oh, okay, that's how they do it, and then another thing to actually do it.
Yeah, exactly. The 100 times you got to make it, and you may figure it out by that point in time.
Oh, I'll never forget one of the best quotes. I think it was Nathaniel Dark who said this to me. He may have gotten it from somewhere else, but for every awesome heady on the shelf, there's 2 just like it in the trash.
Exactly. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
For
it's so
everyone
true.
that makes it out the door, there's 2 more just like it that didn't.
Yeah, it's so very true. It's like that video that Jason Lee did years ago of him smashing that bubbler on the wall because it had like one little tiny imperfection in the
Yup.
piece, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, what
Yep.
the fuck? Are you crazy?"
Yep. Well, you gotta have those high standards, when you're taking those high prices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Yeah, man. So pre-show we were talking about that too, like kind of getting back into the into the swing of things with the industry, and you haven't been on all sides of it. I did myself. Like I ran a smoke shop for about 2.5 years, while still blowing glass, and I didn't go out and sell anybody else's glass, but I was selling my shit. So I've
Mm-hmm.
seen all the sides of the industries and watching the growth and the ebbs and the flows. So here we are now, 2020, with this pandemic going on, and you're like, hey, I'm gonna go start blowing glass again. But on the background, you're also talking about your investments and stuff, which has helped you financially, through I guess the years too. Besides getting other jobs, but now that
Right.
you're like kind of getting your wings back on again, are you gonna go through distributors? You gonna go to retail? Like how are you gonna go, and sell your work in terms of marketing and things?
Well, start close and work your way out, right? So I still have great relationships with the head shops in town, and
Hmm.
like I said, Asheville has tons of head shops in town. So, um, I gotta shout out my favorite in town is definitely Wonderland. Wonderland down in Florida.
Yep.
So they were all started by the same guy, Huey. You know Huey?
Name's familiar, but I don't think I've met him. I met the owners of the one in down in South Florida.
Yeah, so I think her name's Danielle,
Yeah, yeah,
the woman who owns it. So
yeah.
she bought it from Huey.
Okay.
So Huey opened the original Wonderland in Philadelphia. It's like supposedly like the longest running head shop in the country. Like it's been like a head shop since I don't know the late '60s or something. Um, but Huey opened that store, right, and he ran it for years and years and years, and he got tired of living in Philly, so he decided he was going to retire to South Florida. So he moves to South Florida. He opens up the Wonderland down, or he sells the one in Philly, moves to South Florida, opens the one down there. Um, Runs it for a while, decides, you know what? I like Asheville, and decides he's going to sell that store and move to Asheville and open another store. So he does. He moves to Asheville. He opens up Wonderland in Asheville. It's in a great spot. Oh my God, the space it's in is beautiful. It's in like almost the dead center of downtown. Like it'd be hard to be more central. Like it's in such a good spot. Um, he let his daughter Abby manage this store. Abby Abby doesn't get along with people very well. Lots of the glassblowers in town had bad experiences with them. And so they struggle to get local glass, which is a really big deal in a town with not just local glass. But Asheville has a huge, huge focus on local, like local, local, local. So to be the only head shop in town that doesn't have much for local glass doesn't do much for you. So Wonderland started to struggle. They decided they were going to go out of business. Their head cashier, the guy who'd been working for them for years, stepped up and made a deal with them and bought the store from them. His name's Richard, and he is amazing. Richard Hogan. He is such a good dude. So when I was just trying to sell glass to them, right? So I'd go in, I would look at their glass. I'd see frit spoons on the shelf that I knew who was making them.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew who was making them and I knew what they were charging for them. So I went to Hewing. I said, look, you see these frit spoons? I know what you're paying for them. Mine are better and cheaper. Why aren't we doing business? You know, and he'd be like, oh man, you're right. We should be doing business. Come back at 5 and Abby will buy them. And I come back at 5 and Abby would be like, yeah, we're just not buying right now. And I'm like, look, 2 hours ago, your dad said you were buying. What's going on? You know, and so I'd get the runaround all the time up there. Well, Richard, the cashier, would be like, well, let me see what you got, you know, and buy pieces off of me, you know, and so for years, Richard's like go-to piece was one that I made. So I'm living with another glassblower who was trying to chase down Wonderland for a check. They said, don't cash it, don't cash it, don't cash it. And he's like, well, this is bullshit, you know? So I said, well, I'll go up there with you and we'll get that money. So I went down there with him, and no sign of Abby or Huey, but Richard's there, and he starts writing this guy a check. And he's like, yeah, things are going to be different now that I'm running things. I'm like, what do you mean you're running things? He goes, that means you got to bring me some glass, man. I was like,
Nice.
fuck yes. Yeah, I was stoked. So Richard, man, he's paid my rent more than anybody I can imagine. Like he has bought glass from me more. I had probably sold more glass in Wonderland than anybody else. He's great. So I'm definitely gonna, you know, hit up my local stores because they've always helped me out. And you know, like I said, we do have a ton of distributors, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you deal with this distributor, you can't deal with that distributor. And if you talk to this person, we won't buy from you and blah, 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 blah. So you got to kind of be careful who you choose to deal with there. And then, you know, I was on the road for many, many years. So I do have, you know, boxes full of business cards, but knowing the glass industry, how many of those stores still exist?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
How, like, because man, when I was on the road, it was right in the middle of the spice era. It was right in the middle. Like we were definitely going to stores that weren't making money off of glass, that were definitely just making money off of spice, you know. And now that that's gone, I wonder how many of them are gone. There was a store in Virginia, man. I'll never forget this store. I was training somebody to go on the road, so it was 2 of us in the car. So we're going along. And it's somewhere in like mountainy Virginia. So like we're going around all these twisty, curvy roads, and we're used to mountain roads. We live in Asheville, you know, and there's these pull-offs, you know. So like if your car breaks down, you're not just like in the middle of this curvy, blind road.
Yep.
You can pull over, you know. So in all of these pull-offs, there's 2, 3, 4 cars with their people with just like their stuff piled up, like baby strollers and like TVs and like kids toys, and we're like, what the fuck? Like they look like they're like yard sales in each of these things. Like so many, like we probably saw 30-40 people, you know, on the way to this head shop, pulled over on the side of the road selling their shit. We're like, what is going on here? Like this is crazy. So we get to this head shop, and it's like this younger dude, like the cashier guy, and then there's like the like owner guy or whatever. So we're talking to the cashier guy, and we're like, what's up with this? Is this like yard sale day? Like did people like do this? You know? He's like, oh, those are the spice heads. We're like, what are you talking about? They're out there selling their shit so they can come down here and buy spice.
Jesus.
Like, are you serious? And spice and bath salts, they sold them both. So I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, man, it's crazy. He's like, I pull up to work and I'm trying to like hit a bowl before I go in the morning, and I got people like banging on the windows of my car trying to get me to open up the store and let them get their shit, you know. And so I'm like, dude, does anywhere like else around here? No. He said nowhere else within 50 miles sells this stuff. We're the only place. This store, I go in, so it's like an old Blockbuster, right? And they had a fire in like the big part of the store, so they've got like this little side part. It's no bigger than like a bedroom. They've got like 3 cases. One has all China glass. The other 2 is all spice and bath salts and bullshit. They take me into the back. They have 2 massive like vaults, huge, like bigger than like a closet, like the biggest gun safe you can imagine, like 2 of them. One of them is just full of money, and the other one is just full of bath salts and spice. I could not believe what I was seeing. And then of course they didn't buy shit because they were not interested in American made glass. That's for damn sure. Mm-hmm. So I think I ended up getting like a $500 sale out of them. But that one store, like single-handedly ruined that town. Like I cannot believe it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was weird, man. Because at that point in time too, I helped this company get set up for getting their studio going, and they were like a big distributor, manufacturer of that shit. And part of my going into them was that they were telling me that they were phasing out of it. They made all this money on it, and they wanted to take the money and invest it into starting a glass blowing studio with American made glass. And I was like, cool. As long as you guys are transitioning out of this, I'm fine with it. But if this continues, I'm not fine with it, kind of thing.
Right.
So I made a good salary with them, got a studio. I basically built my dream studio out of it in a sense, and having to deal with permitting, like it was a fucking nightmare when it all came down to it. But they continued to sell all the shit, and then the feds started coming, started whispering and stuff, and started coming around, and I eventually ended up quitting. And I told them, like, you guys might as well be selling crack. It's like that's how I felt about it. And then they told me they made $32 million in like 2.5 years.
Fuck.
I was like, well, I understand that, but I don't give a fuck how much money you guys are making. But the upside of it was the shops like that one you're talking about, they obviously didn't give a fuck about the glass, but some of the shops that were making like $100,000 a month selling spice would then turn around and buy like $40,000 pipes and some super high end shit, which really helped, I guess, create the first big wave, in the industry 10 years ago or whenever it was, about 10 years ago. So, it kind of helped. But like you're saying, I wonder how many of those shops still exist, because once that shit was, criminalized in a sense, completely federalized, it was, a lot of shops stopped buying glass because they had $250,000 worth of headpieces in their front two cases in their shops, and they couldn't afford to buy the production spoons, anymore.
Oh man, but that's where I came along. I loved those stores, man. So I would buy those pieces from those stores. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I got a 2006 Darby, like it was a dry piece. It was like kind of ray gunny, but not really. It was nice. It was real organic. $250
Crazy.
Yeah, and it's because they bought this shit and then they couldn't sell it. Mm-hmm. They bought it and then they were like, well, fuck, what do we, it sits on their shelf, and then I come in and I'm like, shit, I'll trade you proto for that, and oh my gosh, yeah, I bought, and what I do is I buy them and then I take them to Wonderland, and Richard would let me put them on consignment in his heady case so he could spruce up his heady case, and I'd sit there and triple, quadruple my money on the things.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it worked
great.
Smart. Yeah, it worked great.
Like the pre-days of flipping glass.
It was flipping glass without the internet. That was before, like, what was it, Boro Market or whatever? Mm-hmm. That was before all of that.
Wow.
Man, there was another spice store. I will never forget this one either. So this was in Cleveland. Like, downtown Cleveland is massive, and it was in like the downtown area. So it's on a corner in downtown Cleveland. It's a long space. Like, you go in and, like, your standard glass case, they probably had like 10 of them, like, along the length of the space, and it didn't even go all the way back. The whole back of the store, the lights were off. There was nothing in it. It was just the first, like, 4 cases had, like, stuff in it. And mostly China glass, spice, bath salts, and China glass pretty much. Problem is, when you're calling around head shops, you don't know until you get there.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's a waste of your time or not, And so it's like, I walk into these stores and I just go, fuck, because I know all I want to do is get out of there as fast as I can so I can try to make it up somewhere else, And so I'm like, I go in and I'm like, what's up, and I got 40 cases, you want me to bring them in the back or what? He's like, he kind of like looks at the back door and like, he's like, nah, we'll just do it here. So I said, all right. So I start going through all my cases, trying to do it as fast as I can. We get through it all, and towards the end, he's like, hey man, you smoke? And I'm like, yes, I do, because that was the thing. When you're on the road, you can't bring shit with you. Because if you get caught with weed and a bunch of pipes, they will hit you. They can hit you with 4 charges per pipe. They can get you in manufacturing, distribution, trafficking, sale. Like, they can get you with so much. So you really don't want that, So we never, ever, ever, ever brought any weed, anything with us. But we always hoped that, head shop owners, glass blowers, whatever, along the way would smoke us up, and so head shop owner said, hey man, you smoke? I said, fuck yeah, I do, He's like, here, and tries to hand me just like a loose handful of weed. And I'm like, man, I can't take this with me, Like, I got a bunch of glass in the car, like, I can't smoke this in my car, like, I can't do anything with this. I'm like, you got like a pipe, or like, you mind if I just jump in the back real quick, something? And he like looks at the back door again. And it's like, nah, we'll just smoke it here. Give me that. And so he sits there and rolls a blunt on the head shop counter with the door open in downtown fucking Cleveland. So I'm sitting there like, all my alarm bells are ringing.
Oh, I'm
I'm
sure.
like, this is all bad.
Yeah,
Like,
what the fuck?
I'm real grateful my car is like a block away at this point, because I'm like, man, if they commit, like, I had already put all my glasses shit away. I'm like, worst case scenario, I'm getting a fucking weed ticket in Ohio, which is like $200. It's not the end of the world. But I'm
Mhm.
like, this is fucking crazy. It's like, I've smoked weed in head shops, but after hours, doors locked, like not in downtown Cleveland with the door open. So he rolls this thing, lights it, hands it to me across the fucking thing. And I hit it. I'm just staring at that door. Sure enough, a fucking cop car pulls up and stops at the light right outside. And I'm like, take this motherfucker. Like, I don't want this shit. Take it. He looks at him. He goes, fuck them. If they come in here, I got bigger things to worry about. So I'm sitting there like, what is in the back room? Like, at this point, I really am just like, something bad is in that back fucking room.
Yeah, sounds
I'm
like it.
pretty. He said he was making his own spice, and that was what was back there. But I'm like, man, that might have been back there, but something else was back there too. Like, Jesus, like that was one of the sketchiest moments of my distribution career. I was fucking terrified.
Yeah, that is no fun. While you're saying that, dude, I think I remember you and I actually made a road trip from St. Pete area to Orlando to New Galaxy Gifts
Yeah.
smoke shop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I drove you. I think I drove you out there, or maybe I went with you in your car. I don't remember what it was exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like my introduction to that shop. I don't know. It just popped in my head when you were talking about shops. I was like, New Galaxy. I haven't even heard that name in my head in probably 5 years.
I was gonna say, are they still around?
I don't know, honestly. I know that they started manufacturing their own water pipes here in Orlando,
Oh,
and
okay.
I think that the owner that owned New Galaxy sold the line to Orlando Glass Union here locally, something of that nature. I don't remember
Right.
the what the story is exactly, but I don't know if the smoke shop's there. But I know the water pipes are still getting cranked out.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Anyways,
it's it's crazy how fast head shops roll over, man. It's like if you have a head shop and you've been open for more than 3 or 4 years, you're in like the 90th percentile. Like, you're doing better than the vast majority of head shops.
well, it's like glass blowers. If you can survive the first year,
Right.
pat yourself on the back.
Right. I think, yeah, it's like year two that you start to really kind of feel like you got your legs under you.
Yeah, and it takes like 10 years to get your fucking feet and really going.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, that's a whole nother thing. So yeah, man. So that being said, just, with your production lines, so you start off doing pendants and shit, and then you're making spoons, and you're saying your frit spoons are your go-to. Are you looking at expanding outside your lines from that, or are you just going to try and do like your little bread and butter, keep that rolling?
Since I got all my bills paid, I might as well explore a little. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, not many times in my glass career have I not had to do it for a living. The vast majority of my glass blowing I've had to do in order to pay rent and shit. And crazy story, you can't pay rent with pipes. You
yeah.
can't just give them pipes and they give you rent. It doesn't work like that. And selling it is a full-time fucking job. Like, it really is. Um, but no, so it's crazy. So, like, before I ever blew glass, I had in my mind the shape that I wanted to make. And then when I was like first doing research, Lurch did a very kind of similar shape. And there's a glassblower around here named Billy Goat. And when I was just a collector, I had a piece. He calls them beaver tails. I call them squatty dry. So basically, I've got a couple on my Instagram. So basically, you do like a disc mouthpiece. You hook it up to like a So basically, I blow like a football with a constriction on the top, and then like a big wide disc on the top of that. And I weld the two discs pretty much so that they're on the same plane. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yep.
I weld the discs on, so the one disc is the mouthpiece, the other disc is the top of the can. I heat that whole football and I flip it towards the mouthpiece and then lean it back and puff it out as I push down with a bull push in the push to kind of like keep it on the right plane. Um, but it looks like kind of like a boot with like the tongue sticking out on the top. I don't know. People have told me they look like toilet bowls. I don't know. I call them squatty dries, but I really like them. So my one thing I've always like sworn by in glass, like so there's diffusion in bubblers. Everyone wants to diffuse the smoke. They want to break it up. We used to have the ash catchers, the diffuser stems, all the like the tree perks and all that shit.
Oh God,
It's
no.
all,
Right.
the concept is still valid
Yeah.
when you're looking at a dry pipe. The concept is anytime that smoke hits a surface, anytime it contacts anything, it's going to deposit resin. There's a finite amount of resin in that smoke. The more you take out of it, the less there is in it. The less resin in the smoke, the less resin ultimately in your body. So the rougher you are with the smoke, the cleaner the smoke is ultimately going to be. So I like to design my pipes with as much in the way of the smoke as possible. So with that design, when you smoke through it, the smoke comes down into the base, expands, then constricts back to go through the small hole back to the disc mouthpiece, expands again in the disc mouthpiece, and then constricts again before it comes out the hole in the front of the mouthpiece. So once you do all that, the smoke that ultimately comes out of the vessel, compared to like your typical spoon, is quite clean. I really like the design. I smoke out of one every day. In fact, I sold it to a head shop. I sold it to Wonderland here in town, and then a year later they still had it, so I went back and bought it back, and I use it every day.
Nice. Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's like it really does work. The rougher you are with the smoke, the cleaner it is. I personally don't like water pipes; they mess my throat up. So I like a nice dry pipe that has a lot of diffusion within it.
Yeah, it makes total sense, and I know too. It like cools it down. That's why I like smoking like a big Gandalf, type style dry pipe.
Right, right. Well, the funny thing is, the dirtier your pipe gets, the better it's doing its job
Hmm.
because it's grabbing that resin out of the smoke. So I'm sure you've noticed some pipes get dirtier faster than other pipes. It's because those pipes are doing a better job at cleaning the smoke than the other ones. And you can even make the argument that a dirty pipe is going to provide cleaner smoke than a clean pipe. Because when you get a brand new pipe, that first couple hits on it, they're always really harsh.
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
it's that smooth, slick glass surface. Once you use it once or twice, you get that thin coat of resin along it. That's a bumpy surface as opposed to the smooth glass surface. That bumpy surface has more surface area to grab more resin out as the smoke runs along it.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it like that, which makes sense. I don't clean my pipes ever. It's like the worst person in that, cleaning the shit. I also like to see how long it takes for them to change colors, from start
Right,
to finish. It's always fun.
right, right.
But yeah, it makes sense. You don't get the cleanest toke, but then you get into like into rigs and stuff, and they have to be clean because then you can get mold buildup and all kind
Oh
of
yeah.
fungus and weird shit going on.
Anytime you add water, I don't know. I personally, so I had to have throat surgery when I was younger, and ever since then, any water pipe, even the smallest little rig with the smallest little bit of water, any water pipe just rips the throat right out of me.
Huh.
So it's just not for me.
Interesting. Hell yeah. So speaking of 2020 here too, how have you been managing this year so far? You've been riding the waves of the chaos.
It's actually been pretty much business as usual for us, honestly. Well, I guess my wife's store. So I work at a factory. My wife manages a toy store in the downtown area.
Okay.
Um, the toy store, they also own a boutique, like a clothing boutique that's like right around the corner. That boutique that got the windows shot out and got looted during the Black Lives Matter protests in the beginning of the summer.
Brutal.
Yep. So that happened, and then immediately after that, the store flooded. So they've had a lot going on. But yeah, because I'm a factory worker, and because apparently we're essential, we've just been continuing to crank along. I must say, I really like the social distancing. As someone who doesn't like people near me or touching me, I
Hmm.
really like that I have an excuse to not have people around me. That's nice.
Yeah, we've been saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's like if that can just stay, that'd be great. I
Right.
don't know why people need to be in my space in the first place.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, like we're over at Disney hanging out and, doing our thing over there in the lines and stuff. We're like, man, I wish this could stay like this forever.
right, right. No, it's been pretty calm. The biggest annoyance for me, honestly, like I said, I'm setting the studio up. I'm setting it up in an old barn on my property, and before I put my thousands of dollars worth of glass equipment in it, I wanted to make sure it was secure. And the doors on it had been there for 50 years, 60 years, and so they were all rotted, and I don't know, you could look at it funny and they'd fall off. So
Yeah.
I had to replace the doors on it. It costs $180 in lumber to replace those doors.
Jesus.
I cannot believe. I'm a carpenter. Like I grew up in a wood shop. When I went to college, I got my degree in lighting and technical design. So I worked as a technical director for theaters. So my job was to take a design, figure out how to make it, figure out how much wood it would take, and then how much that wood would cost. So I'm very good at estimating how much a project should cost, and in normal times that would have cost $70. I could not believe when I got up to the checkout at Lowe's and they wanted $180.
Yeah, it's crazy. Are they like large barn doors too that you're working with, or just standard doors?
They're like 3x6, two 3x6 doors, so
Okay,
it's like
yeah.
a sheet of plywood each, and then like 15 2x4 something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Huh.
But it's crazy how much all that adds up when lumber is just through the roof right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I wonder if the building boom going on right now too has anything to do with it, because I know like here in the area, like construction just fucking bonkers right now. Everything going
Well,
on.
that's exactly what it is. Is yeah, the how it's because everybody's able to move out of the expensive city centers and move somewhere a little bit cheaper. And because it's cheaper than what they're used to, they're like, well, shit, we've been spending, $3,000 a month on rent in New York City. Let's move out to bumfuck upstate New York, do everything over Zoom, and they can take that $3,000 a month and turn it into a decent house that they have built,
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, people are buying houses and renovating houses like at a ridiculous rate right now.
Yeah, yeah, same around here. Most of it's like some of the old neighborhoods are just going in and tearing the houses down, and like a lot of these homes are on
Right.
like double lots, so they'll put two big fucking homes on them.
Right.
Crazy. But speaking of Zoom, so like pre-recording too, we were talking about investing and stuff, and I want to kind of talk about that a little bit too, because as a glass blower, you got to diversify. You can't just like rely on your glass. You got to have something else,
Yeah.
For long-term retirement, especially. And I know a lot of glass people. I think humans in general don't think about that far out, but you have to like still prepare and plan for when you're in your
Yeah.
60s and 70s and 80s, and what are you gonna do? How are you gonna feed yourself? Not relying on Social
Right.
Security, because that shit's fucking nothing.
Right.
So like this whole COVID thing happened, and I started hearing a lot about Zoom, and I had heard about Zoom a couple years ago, but not as much. Obviously now it's like Skyping. It's like it's part of our vernacular now. And my wife and I were both like, man, I wish we could have dropped like $100 in stocks, And then we were like watching all these other big stocks out there go to shit. Like Disney's stock was under $100 for about 3 days, and it usually runs around like 160 to 180 a share. And I still regret not getting. I don't know if there were any available to purchase. I don't know how their stocks work. If they allocate so much or whatever. But investing is a smart thing. And you had talked about wanting to start like a show or something of your own to educate people in a simple form on investing. So like for the glass blowers out there that need something, a long-term investment for themselves. I know you're not a professional in this, but still you have knowledge.
Yeah.
So anything you want to pass on?
Yeah. So first of all, that disclaimer you just mentioned, do your own research. Investing is inherently risky. Do not buy or sell anything based on what you hear here. All right. So now that has been said, so investing is basically it's buying ownership shares in a company. So when you buy a stock of Disney, you are buying a share of ownership. You literally own that tiny piece of that company. So when you look at the shares outstanding, how many shares they have out there, that's, you can figure out your percentage of ownership, which if you buy one share, it's going to be like 0.0000001%, something ridiculous like that.
Yep.
Um, so when you buy stocks, there's two ways to make money. It can either go up in value or you can get dividends. And hopefully it does both. So dividends, so you own part of Disney, right? So when Disney makes money, they should give you some of that money. So that's what a dividend is. It's basically they're paying you to own that stock. Dividends, a good dividend's usually around like 5%. They can go as high as like 9, 10%. But that's annually. So say you buy $100 share and it's a 5% dividend. Every year they're going to give you 5% of that stock's value. And let's just pretend that it doesn't go up. Let's just pretend it stays at $100. So in 20 years, you have something for free now because they've given you that money, that $5 a year for 20 years. It's $100.
Yep.
You can set dividends to automatically reinvest. So when you buy, something with a 5% dividend, instead of them giving you $5, they give you a portion of a share of their stock. And thanks to compound interest, if you do that, it adds up really quickly. So I'm gonna real quick. So you're talking about Disney. Let's see. When I was a kid in like 1996, 1995. Let's see. Disney was December 29th, 1995. Disney was $19.62 a share.
Jesus.
It is now $154 a share. So back in 95, you ask any 5-year-old, any 10-year-old, what's going to be around? Disney. No one thought Disney was going anywhere back in 95. And if you had bought $20 worth of Disney back in 95, it'd be worth $154 now. And their dividend yield's kind of low, 1%, but you would have also made dividends over that whole period. So there's a few different like schools of thought of investing. There's day trading, there's value investing, there's swing trading. Value investing is probably the most common. It's like the Warren Buffett school of investing, basically. Basically, what it is you're taking money that you don't need to touch for at least 10 years, and you're putting it on a company that you believe strongly will be worth more in 10 years. So it's not short term. It's not, I want to make a quick 10%, whatever, blah, 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 blah. It's trying to hold on to something for the long term. And that's what, like, when you look at stuff like Disney, like that would be more value investing. You're not trying to buy Disney to make a quick profit. You're buying Disney because you think it'll be around in 10 years.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, so there's also day trading, where day trading you basically need a lot more money to do it, where you're buying in and out of a position. Say it goes up a penny, you sell it, goes back down 2 pennies, you buy it again, it goes up 3 pennies, you sell it, goes down 2 pennies, you buy it again. And you do that repeatedly, and through volume and having a lot on the market, you end up making a lot of money. But honestly, so if you're getting started in investing, the best thing to do is go ahead and put some money on the S&P 500 or something similar. So the S&P 500, what that is, it's a collection of the 500 most valuable stocks on the market in the United States. So those stocks are generally going to perform well. They're the 500 most valuable, so they're generally going to perform well. So when you hear like the S&P 500, it's up 1%, that's what it's talking about. The S&P 500 on average returns 8 to 12% a year, which is not bad. So basically, if you do the math, if you take any company that's around for 10 years, on average, they'll return 10% a year over 10 years. It may go down 8% this year, but up 12% the year after that. On average, you can expect about 10% a year. So the S&P 500 given between 8 and 12% a year, that's kind of considered like the average. Like that's considered like a safe bet to make about what you would. Basically, people are like, you can't really pick stocks better than S&P 500. S&P 500 will generally outperform any stock you pick. So generally, that's a good place to start. The best, something to really think about is inflation. Basically, inflation on average is about 2% a year. So at the end of the year, any money you have sitting in savings, sitting under your bed, whatever, it's worth 2% less. Your money is constantly losing value. When you look at like something in the 60s and it's like a car costs $2,000 and now it costs 20,000, that's inflation, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not beating that, if you're not making at least 2% a year on your extra money, you're losing money. So it's pretty easy to take that money and just put it on the S&P 500, and instead of losing 2% a year, you're going to make 6 to 10% a year. Which if you're listening to this and you've got $100 extra, like 6 to 10% really doesn't sound like much. But it's about getting skin in the game. It's about once you've started investing in the stock market, you care about it. You want to know more about it. You don't want your money to just sit there. You want to know how to make more from it. And so, I find a lot of people that I've been wanting to invest for years, but I've never done it. Blah blah blah. Well, if you just take $100 and put it on the S&P 500, you'll do it. You'll become more personally invested to it once it's your money on the line. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm a firm believer that everybody should invest. Like anything, the more time, the more effort, the more energy you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. Like you were saying back in March when everything dipped, oh my gosh, if you had picked anything in the S&P 500 back then, you're likely nearly double at this point.
Oh yeah,
Pretty
totally.
much anything. I mean, like you said, Disney dropped down to I'm seeing $85, so almost double since then.
Yeah.
And you don't even need to buy full shares anymore. Um, when I got into stock trading, it was much more expensive. It's basically free now. So like when I started trading, you expected to pay $5 to $10 per trade in trading fees. I've spent $500 in a year just on trading fees, and that's annoying as hell. So like you buy a share of something for $10, you got $5 in trading fees to buy it, and then you got $5 in trading fees to sell it. So that share has to more than double in value before you make anything from it, just because you have to beat those trading fees.
Right, which makes sense. Yeah.
So now there are apps and all like basically because of Robinhood, all of the exchanges have canceled their trading fees. So now you can trade on E-Trade, whatever, with no commission, which is incredible. And you can buy incremental shares. So like Amazon right now is ridiculous, like $2,000 a share. I don't even look at it anymore because it's so ridiculous. 1 second, it is $3,100 a share.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, so they're $3,100 a share. Back in March, they're $1,800 a share. They dropped as low as $1,600 a share back in March. So they're nearly doubled since March, right? So say back in March, you could have bought $100 worth of Amazon. You don't need to buy a whole share. You could buy $100 worth. And now you would have $200.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to buy a whole share, but whatever percent it goes up, your money goes up. But the more full shares you have, the more money you make. So one company I'm really invested in right now is Virgin Galactic. I'm a firm believer that space is going to be the next big market. It's when space tourism and mining and things get up there, it's going to be a huge industry. There are very few publicly traded space companies, and Virgin Galactic is one of the biggest. So SpaceX is not listed. You cannot buy shares in SpaceX. You can buy shares in Tesla, but they are not SpaceX. They're just owned by the same person. So Virgin Galactic right now it's like $30 a share. They IPO. They started on the stock market at around I think $10 or $12 a share. Right now they're at around 30. So if you bought it at $10 a share, you had one share, and it's up to 30 now. You've made $20. But if you bought 10 shares at $10 a share and it's at 30 now, you've got $200. So for every share you buy, it's a multiple. For if you have 10 shares and it goes up $1, you make $10. If you have 100 shares, it goes up $1, you make $100. So the more shares you have of something, when it moves in a good direction, the more money you're gonna make.
Yeah, that's definitely like a long-term investment too. Something you want to keep in there for 20, 30 years, if not longer.
Yeah. So that's value investing. Like value investing, you generally are not putting money away that you're going to need. You're putting money aside. Like some value investors never sell. They just hold, and then when they die, their family gets it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's nice to have when you need it. So say you invest money that you don't really intend to need, but then something comes up, like you suddenly need to buy a house and you need to have thousands of dollars for all the down payments and all that stuff. You can sell part of your portfolio and have it. Granted, you're going to have to pay taxes on it, but if you hold a share for more than a year, you're taxed at your nominal tax rate. So whatever tax rate you're already taxed at, you will get taxed at the same rate for anything you sell, and you only get taxed on the profits. You don't get taxed on the full value.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So that tax bill, like people look at it and they don't want to pay it. They look at it as unfair, blah 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 blah. But man, 70% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Oh
And
yeah. Totally.
I've heard people tell me like the taxes is why they don't invest, and I'm like, you're just leaving money on the table then, because you don't pay taxes until you sell, and even then you're only paying what you would normally pay. It's like if you got a bonus at work. No one turns down a bonus at work because they don't want to pay the taxes associated with it. Like
Right.
that's just foolish,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and one thing. So you're talking about retirement. So crazy thing, dividends. Let's say you have $1 million. You invest it on a stock that has a 5% dividend. You're now getting paid $50,000 a year just to own that stock. That's how wealthy people invest in the stock market for a living. They put their money on things that are high dividend, and then they put enough money on those things that those dividends pay for their lifestyle.
Yeah. Exactly.
So your goal should be to have $1 million in a 401k account by the time you're 65.
Yeah.
Because if you have $1 million, you will never have to remove any of that from your 401k. It can stay there until you die and then become your kids. Because that $1 million will provide you with $50,000 a year. Depending on what you have it on. It'll provide you with enough annually that you don't need to take anything out and that you can just live off of the dividends.
Yeah, completely. I know listening to Dave Ramsey for years and years and years, he always recommended Roth IRAs as small investments, for long-term retirement stuff. And doing the Roth, you pay the interest or you pay the taxes up front. So when you go to cash it out, you're not paying taxes in the backside. So if you have $500,000 in there and you cash it out and it's a Roth, you get the $500,000. But if you're paying it tax-free at first, then you got to pay taxes on that total. And 15% of $500,000 is a lot of fucking money.
It is. But the one thing you want to consider when you think about that is when you ultimately sell, it's your nominal tax rate. So say right now you're making shitloads of money, right? You're making a ton of money. You got some high flying job. You're making $300,000 a year, right? So when you put that money in, it's taxed at the tax rate you have now.
Right.
So at $300,000 a year, that's going to be a really high tax rate. But then say you retire early because you've been making all this money, right? But you don't withdraw from your 401k. So you start blowing glass on the side, whatever, and you do it through an LLC and you pay yourself $50,000 a year. When you go to pull out of your 401k, if you weren't taxed on the way in and you're getting taxed on the way out, now your tax rate is considerably lower than when it was going in. So
Yeah, it
you
makes
end
sense.
up
Yeah.
so you end up saving money because your tax rate is considerably lower. So that's one thing you just need to think about. Like, is my tax rate now lower or higher than it will be in the future? So like personally, I expect to be making more money in the future, so I'm okay with paying my low tax rate now to save on a potentially larger tax rate in the future.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's anytime with finances, it is nearly impossible to find that one size fits all solution. Everybody is going to have different needs. What's good for one person isn't necessarily going to be good for the next. It's just one of those things that's unnecessarily complicated, and because of that, there are a lot of things you need to consider when you're making your financial choices.
Yeah, for sure, dude. And for one, definitely see, consult with an actual tax person or not tax person, but
Absolutely.
and investor too. But the key thing that you said there though was having an LLC, and it's part of what I've seen with this COVID thing is that those that have a glass business but they're not an LLC, they couldn't consider having payroll coming out,
Right.
consider themselves
Right.
an actual business, and they didn't get the stimulus checks this year because of that.
I'm just gonna say it. There is no reason on earth for any independent glassblower to not have an LLC. There are advantages on advantages on advantages, and nearly no disadvantages. Yeah, you're gonna have to pay taxes, but you're gonna be able to get home loans. You're gonna be able to get a car loan when stuff like this happens, and there's the payroll program. You're gonna be able to get that. Like,
Yep.
you're gonna have a paper trail. You're gonna be able to be tax exempt on all your supplies. Like, there are so many reasons to go ahead and do it. It's not hard. It's not expensive. You don't need to do legal Zoom, all that shit. Those things are really expensive. Look at your local resources. Look at your state resources. See what their forms are, what their fees are. Like, a lot of the time it's a lot cheaper and really easy just for you to do it by yourself. Granted, yeah, you probably want to have an accountant. You probably want to deal with a tax specialist. But man, there is no reason to not have an LLC. Like, what we do is not illegal, guys. Like, we should be above board. We should be paying taxes, and we should be getting the benefits associated with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Be legit. There's no reason not to be.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can set up 401k accounts, you can set up business bank accounts, you can set up so like what I do is I have my LLC, I do all my investing through my LLC, and then because it's a pass-through entity, I only get taxed on 80% of the income. So I save 20% on my tax bill just by running all my investments through my LLC.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Like, there's no reason on earth not to have an LLC if you're doing something for yourself like this. When you go to buy a house, they will laugh at you if you can't show income, if you can't show it through an LLC. Like,
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and like I said too, you pay yourself a salary. It's just way easier just to function as a business, and then you're not stressing about shit because you know that you have money put aside for materials and your rent and your
right,
everything else
right,
and your food. Everything.
right. No,
And you're paying your
there's
taxes.
yeah, it, in my experience, the vast majority of glass blowers either are or were junkies or dealers, and that's fine, but that's not the industry you're in anymore. The industry you're in now, you can do the legal things, you can do it the above board way. They're happy to take your money for taxes. Like, it's just there's no reason on earth to not register a business. And the costs are different depending on where you are. In North Carolina, where I am, it's $100 to register it, and then $200 annually to put in your annual report. But that's it. That's it. Beyond that, it's just paying the taxes that you honestly should be paying anyway. Because I don't know, I like driving down roads and having schools and
Yeah,
hospitals and things like that.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're paying yourself a salary, then you're having money going to Social Security down the road for retirement and shit. If you don't
right,
do an IRA, which you should anyways.
you
But then you're
absolutely
also
should.
then you pay your quarterly taxes, so you're not your estimated at least your Schedule
Right,
C's, so
exactly.
you're not worrying about this $30,000 tax bill at the end of the year if you're making that kind of income. You know.
Yep, I put 40% of everything aside, and that's usually way more than enough to pay the taxes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I always preach like a 30-30-30-10 kind of thing,
Right,
and have that 10% as just on the side just to cover whatever is missing.
right, right. No, you got to set it up right. You gotta. You're only hurting yourself down the road by not doing it now.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason to wait.
Yeah, and with things like QuickBooks, and then you got home professionals out there that like my tax person. I think I maybe 1 year paid $100 because I had to do 2 years worth of taxes,
Right.
and it cost me $100 for to do my taxes, and shit was done properly. She saved me a ton of money that she was able to find, and it's just
Right.
it's so beneficial just to take it seriously. And if whether you're day one on the torch or you've been doing this for 10 years, there's no better time to start than now, as they say.
Well, the LLC is valuable for everything. Like I may be different. I'm like a compulsive side hustler. I don't know, chronic entrepreneur or something. I see dollar signs everywhere, and so even without glass, it's still nice to have the LLC just to run all that stuff through, just
Hmm.
to save on taxes and be able to show actual income. When we bought our house, I was very, very glad to be able to show that extra income. Like without that, it would have been nearly impossible to prove to them that we're making enough.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so important, so important. So, well, dude, I think that's a good place for us to take a quick break. Thanks for sponsors, and then time
Sure.
for us to get into the crash in the kiln round.
Sounds great.
All right, cool. We are back. So the crashing in the kiln round consists of 7 questions, I believe. I've been wanting to count these questions for so long, and I still haven't. But I think there's 7 questions. But you can give me a 30 to 60-second answer on them, or expound upon them as most people usually do.
Sure.
And the first question I always like to ask, which is a toughie, is if there's any living glass artist out there that you haven't worked with yet or collabed with yet. Who is it and why?
All of them.
Right.
I've never been one to really do the collab thing. Honestly, the glass blowers I've collabed with are probably some of the least known, and you could probably count them on one hand. But that's not it's not for any reason other than I just kind of keep to myself.
Hmm.
When I traveled, when I was on the road for the distributor, I would blow glass with tons of people and just kind of like leave pieces, like work on a piece and then just leave it. But yeah, I guess part of it is being just always having been a proto worker. I kind of, I don't know, doing the fancier stuff is maybe a little more nerve wracking. And I'm more comfortable in my proto space. And when I do reach out of it, I guess I kind of want the stakes to be lower. It's only my piece I'm screwing up, not a collab.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I really haven't done a whole lot of collabs, but I guess I wouldn't mind. I guess I see a lot of people doing like the mail collabs where they ship pieces to each other and
Hmm.
stuff like that, and I guess I'd be willing to ship pieces out, but Lord, I would be terrified to receive pieces.
Right. Be like the person that just
I
makes the sections.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the one to have to put it together. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because I would not want that level of stress on my shoulders.
Yeah, it's fucking nerve wracking for sure.
Right, someone else's work. Whew.
Yeah. Number 2 is what are your top 5 favorite colors in glass?
Oh man. Okay. Whew. Okay, so I am a frit worker primarily. So these are pretty much all going to be frit. Obviously amber purple, anything in the amber purple family, double amber purple, those are all
Hmm.
amazing. I call them cruise control for awesome.
Hell yeah.
Unless you're beating them up on a premix real good, you really can't do them wrong. The amber purple family is top notch. I also love Andromeda from Alchemy. I love it. It's definitely one of my favorite colors of all time. It's a green sparkle that shifts to purple with no chromium whatsoever. So there is no risk whatsoever of checking any, like no check whatsoever. I mix it with everything just to give it a little sparkle. It's not as reactive as Mystery Aventurine. It doesn't go quite as green or quite as purple as Mystery will. Um, but it's like a watered down mystery with a denser sparkle and no checking issues.
Interesting. Yeah, I was gonna ask you
Uh,
about the checking because I know some of the sparkle colors are motherfuckers on the inside.
it's Alchemy's check free sparkle. Whatever they use to make that sparkle that does not check, it's incredible. But there is zero chromium content in it, so it does not check. I use it deep. I use it I use it all the time. I love that color.
Heck yeah.
Um, ooh, here's a rod. I've never had it in frit though. I think it would be awesome. But secret white, tag secret white. Oh my gosh. So that's the first one I've played with in the new like pearly white family.
Hmm.
But I love it. I bought, I'm lucky enough to live right down the road from Mountain Glass. So I just go down there and buy like a stick or two of stuff to try them out. I went down there and got a stick of their odds, and it was glorious, and went back and bought a pound. I never buy a pound of anything in rods because I normally just go down there and like take all the boro bits they have and buy just boro bits and then use those for like my like little grippers and stuff. But yeah, I bought a whole pound of that stuff just because it was incredible. Um, I desperately miss the original Rasta Gold.
Hmm.
As far as line work goes, that is the single best yellow. I hate the crayon yellow in tube pulls. It waters down real bad. That Alchemy Rasta Gold, the original before all the cadmium crap, that was definitely one of the best colors in the palette. As far as, I don't do a whole lot of tube pulls, but when I did do tube pulls, that was an essential color. And experimental green. Oh my gosh, experimental green is incredible. You got to know how to work it. It's too dense out of the factory. It comes really, really dense. So I like I said, I use it mostly as frit, but I'll mix it with everything. I'll mix it with aqua, white. I mix it with Andromeda. I mix it sometimes with amber purple, but I'll mix it down so it's like 25% experimental green and then a bunch of other stuff. And when you use it, you get a really consistent bright green, but you have to water it down with something else. If you use it by itself, you get a really dense, almost black. But if you water it down with, I've used North Star Yellow, like the strikey yellow works really good. Alchemy Aqua works good, whites. But yeah, if you mix experimental green down with pretty much anything, it is one of the nicest, brightest greens you can get.
Yeah, it's beautiful, all encased, and see that nice
Right.
green going out of it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
We
it's
used to call it checks cashed.
nice. Yeah.
Anything you use experimental green on, that check's gonna cash.
Yeah, it was a hype color for a while. It was like one of the early on hype colors for a while. And it
I
was
think it
only
was the first. I think it was the first experimental to go full production.
yeah, probably. That makes sense. And it's funny when I say hype too, I don't mean like hype amongst like collectors. It was just hype amongst like the glass blowers using
Oh yeah,
it,
we all
you know.
loved it, and it's because it's so buttery. It doesn't
Yeah.
boil. It works really nice.
I used to get it mixed up with my cobalt rods, like my dark cobalt.
Easy to do.
Oh
Yeah.
man, it would drive me nuts. I'd go to do like some wrapping rakes, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I realized I was wasting
Right.
all this experimental green.
Right, because back then it was crazy expensive too. It was like $120 a pound when it
Yeah.
first came out.
Yeah, times have changed. Color's still expensive, but
Right.
definitely
right.
a bigger palette. So, having not had a lot of time in the studio, but you still have had your fair share. What's your worst injury in the studio?
I had a piece of glass stuck in my foot for like 6 years.
Oh yeah, I've had that before too.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Was it for being
I've
barefoot in the studio?
flip flops.
Yeah,
Flip flops.
yeah. Mhm.
That was when I learned to not wear flip flops in the studio. I still have plenty of scars from gashing myself open. I think I'm in the minority though, as I've never had to go to the hospital for a glass blowing industry or injury.
Nice. Yes, I haven't either. I probably should have a couple times, but I never went.
That's what super glue's for, right?
Yeah, exactly. Rub some dirt in it.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing. It's like you cut yourself, but you also cauterize it, so it works out.
Yeah. Yeah, I even put my hand on my flame twice. Like I still didn't go to the hospital, you know.
Oh yeah, I'm lucky to have never done that. I've got a giant beard, and that's been singed a few times. I've gotten like hunks of glass in it a few times, but I feel like it's saved my chin a few times.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I know I find glass every once in a while on my head, on my scalp, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? And it's like, oh, it's a little piece of cobalt or something, you know.
It took me a while to figure out what was going on, but I'll get like little glass splinters in the tips of my fingers, and then they'll work their way down my finger to like a knuckle, and then they'll like bump up and eventually like poke through the skin. it took me ages to figure out like what was happening there. I'd get these little bumps and it was like, what the hell? And I'd eventually like nip it open and find a little piece of glass. And I'm like, how am I getting glass in my knuckles? And it's not. It's coming in the fingertips and working their way down.
Yeah, it's so weird how the body rejects it like that. With your foot,
Right.
did it ever come out of your foot?
I eventually cut it out of my foot because I got tired of it. It would move slightly. It would like change its position and start to hurt, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I just got down there with a utility knife and chopped it open and got it out.
Hell yeah. Mine ended up eating a hole in my foot just from the years of like walking on
Oof.
it. And it would like start to push itself out, and I would take a step, and I'm like, "Oh my god, what the fuck is that?" And then I would,
Right,
like you're saying,
right.
then you remember what it is, you know. And I looked at my foot one day, and I had like this, just like rotted out little tiny. It wasn't big, but it was enough to be like, "That's fucking gross. What is that?"
Right,
You know,
right.
my body couldn't reject it, so it just like ate itself out, kind of thing. It was weird.
Yeah, it built up like a callus on the bottom of my foot where it was. So I had to like cut all the way through the callus to get to it.
Yeah, but man, it feels good when you get it out.
Oh my god, yeah, it's so nice to not have that bump on my foot anymore.
Yeah. If you could describe the sound of glass cracking in one word, whether like an actual sound that it makes or like, you know, a psychological sound that you feel internally, what would it be?
You mean the sound that haunts my nightmares?
Yeah, that one.
Tink,
Yeah.
tink. Oh my gosh, it's like you'll have a nightmare. It's like you're in school and the teacher calls you up to the board and you look at her and she's all mad and she opens her mouth and all you hear is tink.
And you're also naked while you're there too.
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, like, yeah, that. And the worst is when you feel it, when you don't even hear it, when you just feel it in the handle. You're like, oh fuck. And then depending on how complex it is, you got to sit there and look at it for like 5 minutes to try to find where it went, where it happened. Oh my god, that is the worst. Because then you're like, maybe I didn't feel it. Maybe everything's okay. Maybe this piece I have 3 days into is not totally bricked. Maybe we're good. Shit, there it is. Like,
Yeah, it's the worst. And I've been doing a lot more bridging over the last couple of years too. So that's like this, sometimes a bridge will pop.
yep.
And which is also sucks because then you're like going back to weld the piece that you're working on, and the bridge, isn't connected like it should be, and all of a
Starts
sudden,
flopping.
yeah, like what the fuck?
Been there, yep.
Sucks. Amateur hour for sure. Sometimes it feels like.
Oh yeah. No, I'll never forget this moment. My like worst loss, I think, in glassblowing. Like I said, I do a lot of proto, so I don't generally spend like a whole lot of time on headies. I like to kind of get my proto out of the way, and then whatever extra time I have at the end of the day, I like to do funner stuff, And so this is when I was doing the newspaper and had all my bills paid, so I could be a little more adventurous in the studio. So I had spent 2 days on this huge, crazy piece. And a headshot buyer had come into the studio. This is like a studio I rented space in. A headshot buyer who was like a new buyer and like all gung ho. Quinn, actually, he started a distribution company. He worked for Glass X for a while and he started his own distribution company. So anyway, he had come into the studio and saw me working on this piece and was like, "Oh wow, that's amazing!" Like, "Oh, blah." Like, I guess he hadn't seen many people blow glass at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a really big piece for me. It was probably like 1.5 feet tall, like big, like 6-inch bubbler base. It was this huge bubbler. I had worked. So like normally when you weld a bubbler mouthpiece onto the can, there's that kind of empty space below the weld and like the base.
Yep.
So I had made my mouthpiece go like the whole length of the can. So it was like this really long, really cool piece. So I had spent 2 whole days working on this thing. I was looking at it to make sure I hadn't missed any, anything I need to clean up, any punny marks, anything like that. And I was holding it by the blow hose or the blow tube. All I had to do was take the blow tube off. And I was going to throw it in the kiln, wait 20 minutes, pull it out, take the blow tube off, and it was done. So I'm holding it by the blow tube. I'm looking at it. It slips straight through my hand. I had already taken my blow kit off of it because normally I would catch it by the blow kit,
Yeah.
But I had already pulled the blow kit off because I was getting ready to stick it in the kiln. It just slipped straight through my fingers, hit the floor, and just smashed into a million fucking pieces.
Oh man.
I
The
was
worst.
mad as hell. So I ended up making like a different one, like one that wasn't nearly as like intricate or elaborate or nice, but it was like vaguely the same colors. Um, and I brought it into that head shop where that buyer had come from, and he was like, "Oh, this is the one I saw you making. I'll totally buy it." And I was like, yeah. Because at the time, I think it was like the most expensive single piece I had ever sold, and I
Uh,
was like, I'm fucking selling this thing.
hell yeah.
Like, damn it. After the other one was smashed on the floor, I'm way out of money on this, like, I am fucking selling it. So I was like, yeah, that's the piece. Totally.
That's amazing. He'll never know.
No, he will if he hears this.
Yeah, right. And at least there's a story behind it.
Yeah, it's fine. It sold out of his store. It eventually sold, so it's
Nice.
all good.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Yeah, once it goes to the customer, we all did our job.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's so funny. So when you're in the shop or doing your thing, are you watching TV, listening to the radio, or doing both?
I like to watch shows and listen to podcasts. So I've been doing this since I started. Since it was really difficult to have shows and stuff in the studio, I still did it. I bring like an old laptop and hook it up to a monitor and speakers and shit, and but I really like to like watch stuff I've seen a million times,
Mm-hmm.
because that way I don't have to actually look at the screen to know what's going on. If I tune out for a little while, I can tune back in and know exactly what's going on. I don't feel the need to like rewind it to like see a part again, that I missed. Um, but yeah, so I really like to watch shows I've watched a million times. And podcasts, oh my gosh, it's like a time machine. I don't know how, but I start listening to podcasts and then like 10 hours are gone. It's crazy.
Yeah, I love it too.
Yeah, it's nice. So I can't do music. I've done music in the studio, but for whatever reason, it doesn't make time go as fast. Like I can't like engage with it as much. I can't focus on it as much, so it doesn't like take me away from what I'm doing enough. Especially when you're sitting there making 5 frit spoons an hour for 8 hours. Like you really don't want to pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so music just it doesn't bring me away from it enough. And when I started blowing glass, dubstep was the big thing, and it's really difficult to listen to dubstep and blow glass because you screw up everything you're making as you're trying to bounce around.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Totally. Yeah, I think after the years of listening to music in the studio, I just got burnt out. So I was glad to find podcasts or listen. I used to listen to a lot of sports radio just because all my shows were like 3-hour blocks, and it was like, oh, there's 3 hours gone, there's 3 hours gone, and
Right.
it goes quick.
Yeah, no, when I was setting up my studio, I went and bought a $50 32-inch TV just to throw on the bench.
Hell yeah. Yeah, it's good to have. I put my
Yep.
laptop up, same thing, and just put on Disney Plus or Netflix or some shit and just binge on whatever I haven't been wanting to binge on.
I've smashed a few laptops in glass studios, tripping on the cord and yanking them off benches.
Oh, man.
That's happened at least twice.
Brutal.
Yep.
Oh, good Lord, have mercy.
No, I smashed one. I smashed the screen of it, and then I just got a monitor and put the monitor on the bench and just shoved the laptop under the bench and just hooked it up to the monitor.
Nice.
Yep. You do what you gotta do.
Yeah, exactly. So, next one is, do you have any glass blowing themed tattoos?
I don't have any tattoos, so it's not for lack of love for glass. I am not a tattoo person. I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to get a Bic lighter because I've always had a Bic lighter, like my whole life. Like that's the one thing that's like always been in my pocket, and so I've always wanted a Bic lighter, and I've always wanted, well, since blowing glass, I wanted to get the boro molecule like in a chain around my wrist.
Oh, interesting.
But those are the only ones I've ever really considered. But like I said, I don't have actually, so that's not entirely true. When I was on mushrooms with India ink and a needle, I accidentally put a gang sign on my foot, so now I can't wear flip-flops in the ghetto. So that's a thing. But beyond that, I have no tattoos.
Hell yeah. Noted. The last but not least, what are your top 5 favorite tools? And that does not include your torch, kiln, or your glasses.
Top five favorite tools. Definitely diamond shears. 10 out of 10 diamond shears. I use diamond shears constantly. I got the cheap ass $35 economy pair from Mountain Glass like 10 years ago, and they still work great. In fact, they've worn down over the years in a good way. So now I can get them on bigger tubing.
Huh.
So like when I use people's new pairs, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with these? Because they don't accept as big tubing as I'm used to. But I love my diamond shears for my frit spoon technique, and it's crazy. Everybody does frit spoons different. I have seen 20, 30 different ways to make frit spoons. But my way of making frit spoons, the diamond shears, makes it so easy to break down the tube and hook it up to the blow tube. I love my diamond shears. So definitely my diamond shears. My blast shield bull push. I've tried a lot of bull pushes over the years, and I absolutely love my blast shield bull push. The handle is nice and heavy. It almost pushes itself. The graphite is super slick and smooth. It is not worn down. I've had the same one for 10 years. It's not worn down at all. I absolutely love my blast shield bull push. Have to have my blow kit. I cannot work without a blow kit. I am one of those. I don't care. People give me shit for it. I need my blow kit. It makes everything so much easier. I'm not going to struggle when I could just make it easier and have the tool I need to do the job.
Yeah, and especially doing frit spoons, you're not like getting frit in your mouth.
Oh my god, yeah. Well, really, my way of doing them, if you get frit in your mouth, you're doing something really wrong. All right. So I'll go into it a little more. That's what the diamond shears are for. So I'll take a piece of 32 and I'll cut it with the diamond shears, and I'll hook up a handle, like a solid 10 mil handle, to where I just cut, and then I'll cut off a blank on the other side. So I got like a 2.5 inch, 3 inch blank or whatever. That when you cut it off with the diamond shears, you're left with the perfect size hole for a blow tube. So I take that blank and I just pour frit in through that hole. I tag all the frit in the blank, and then I hook up the blow tube. So by the time you hook that blow tube up, all of that frit is well attached. So if you get blow tube in your mouth at that point, you didn't connect all your frit.
Yeah, exactly. Makes sense.
But yeah, it's because you don't have to worry about sizing that hole at all. It is the exact right size every time, which makes it super easy.
Yeah.
All right, so we got diamond shears, blast shield bull push, blow kit. Definitely an L-marver. I gotta have a torch-mounted L-marver. It's like a third hand made of graphite coming out of your chest. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you want that? I gotta have it. In fact, when I got my new Phantom, I got a snub nose, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get a big enough L-marver for it. So I called up Blast Shield and had them give me the biggest one I could possibly mount to that torch. I love it. You gotta have a good L-marver. It's like I said, a third hand made of graphite coming out of your chest.
Yeah, man, I use mine every day.
Oh my gosh, so much. It blows my mind when I see people who don't work it, or even the one that's mounted down in front on the base. Mm-hmm. It does not do the same thing. Like, not even close. Like, you can't drop a handle in it while you're sitting there dicking around on your phone for a second.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's what I use it for all the time.
Right. Everyone does, Like, you can't do that, Like, you got to drop it through the flame to get there and then back through the flame to get out. No, Like, no, you got to have the top mount Omarver. And my old school pencil sharpener. Old school pencil sharpener.
Hell yeah.
Because I buy the little copper-clad graphite rods, and I just shove them in my pencil sharpener and sharpen them down to reamers. So that way I have just dozens of the things everywhere, so I can just at any moment grab a good pencil reamer. I use those things constantly.
Hell yeah, not to mention the ones that you have that are like the octangle style graphite ones that you snap the tips off of, and you gotta...
Oh my gosh, I don't even buy those things anymore because I destroy them so quickly.
Yeah, I haven't bought one in years.
I use my bowl push. I have an old like big ass 1-inch bowl push that I use for like any flaring or anything like that.
Heck yeah, dude. And that, you're saying your bowl push is like 10 years old. I've noticed over the years the graphite has gotten a little softer. I guess I'd say. I don't know if that's what the case. It's just a different quality. It seems like because
really?
Like my bowl push, I've been pushing bowls with it for 20 years.
Right.
And I know like part of my when I would do apprenticeships, one of the things I would give my apprentices when they would like leave the nest was a bull push that I'd make them from hand. And I would, I'd buy the raw material and then, do my thing with it to get it the right shape and whatever. And over the years of doing that, I noticed the graphite got a little softer. It wasn't quite like as shiny and compressed hard-wise.
Yeah.
It could also be the brand. I don't know. I'm sure there's different grades of graphite.
Right. I don't know. I know Blast Shield makes a solid-ass bull push, man. They are incredible. Oh, and never one with the stupid tungsten on the tip. I don't understand those things. Like, every time I've used one, it's just destroyed everything. Like, I cannot do the tungsten tip. It doesn't... The only place I see it being useful is when you're doing, like, a drop stem bub, and you're trying to keep your stem from flopping around. Like, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, beyond that, I cannot see a single use for it. And people, like, live or die by those things, and it does not make sense to me.
No, dude, a buddy of mine had one, and I would just do, like, pushing bowls and spoons, and I would forget that I had the thing on there, and I just would fuck it up every time.
Right. Like, and they're like, well, it keeps your bowl hole the right size. If you can't fix your bowl hole size, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It takes 2 seconds. You heat it with a little bit, and you just touch it with a pencil reamer, and you got a perfect bowl hole. Like... Yeah. I don't understand. It doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, I don't get it either. But then some folks say that a blow hose or an L-marber is a crutch too. So,
Crutch or not, I can make quality work without hating myself at the end of the day. Right. Like, come on.
Dude, I don't know why none of us had blow hoses fucking 20 years ago. It's like now that I have it, it's like, oh my God. That blow torch in it, or blow hose and hand torch, that combo, and the Smith hand torch has been around forever for jewelers and stuff. It's just so funny. Like the guys at work, we use a National. Like I bring my Smith in, but they use Nationals for the hand torch it's like a 1.0 tip on there, 1-ox or whatever the hell it's called, and they've been using that shit for 30, 40 years, and just to clean up seams and stuff. So I saw it in there. I was like, I'll get one now. So I did.
No, I had a Natty briefly and hated it. It was like, all right, I need to get a little Smith. Like. The Natty doesn't do anything for me that the Little Smith can't,
Yeah, exactly. And they're just bulky. I like the Smith hand torches.
They're so big. Yeah, when you're trying to, like, get into a spot to, like, work a weld,
it's right in the way.
You don't need something that big.
I'm always hitting my knob and, like, either turning my propane way up too high or turning the oxygen off,
And especially on those Natties, they're pretty damn touchy. So you touch those knobs a little bit, and you have a very different flame all of a sudden.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, you can fuck some shit up real quick.
Right.
Hell yeah. Well, I think that wraps it up, dude. Before we let you go here, if you want to give us a little parting piece of advice and then where we can find you out there in the world of cyberspace.
Parting piece of advice. Just keep at it, like my story went. I've had a few different torches, lost a few different torches, been blowing glass, been not blowing glass, but glass has been my life for 10 years, in one way or the other, and Just keep at it. If that's what you want to do, there's nothing really stopping you other than yourself. And definitely do some research and get invested in the stock market.
Yeah, completely. And where can we find you out there in cyberspace?
Where can you find me? So Instagram's probably the best. TLKQ on Instagram, at TLKQ. It's like, since I've been off the torch for a little while, it's not really been updated recently, but I am getting back on this week, so expect updates there here shortly.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I'll make sure to have all your links in the show notes and everything.
Sure.
For sure. Well, cool, man. It was good catching up. Definitely looking forward to one of these days getting together with you and throwing some frisbees around and melting some glass. And
yeah, I got my own basket in my yard now, so come on up.
Fuck yeah. I got my wife into. I didn't play disc golf for. I mean, I was playing pretty consistently for probably 5-6 years, maybe even longer, and then moved out to Orlando and wasn't really familiar with the area at all. Like, I knew some courses around here that I'd played, but like just all I was doing was working all the time. And met my wife and stuff and introduced her to the game, and she fell in love with it. And she's actually gotten pretty good at it. It's been fun. So her and I, like, up till about right before Thanksgiving, we were going out like twice a week.
Oh, nice.
Go hit a couple, just hit 9 holes. We have a Turkey Lake Park here. They have like 3 courses on it in the park.
Oh, okay.
Which is pretty rad, and they have every hole has like 3 different pads. Some have 4 pads for it, so you know they're all different levels of experience and what have you.
Right.
And but yeah, man, it's been fun. Definitely, I think disc golf overall, just the sport is great, but it's so good for getting stretched out, man. I can't tell you how many times I go out there with my Frisbee and just find like that right. I can use it, when I warm up, my stretch warm-ups, and I find that right, just a little stretch for my shoulders and my arms and just get all loosened up. Makes it easier to go hit the shop and go actually blow some glass and not feel like I'm a fucking old man and all stiff with arthritis.
Disc golf is what made me see the value in stretching. Like that is the first time in my life I discovered that I had to stretch before I did this. Otherwise, I would regret it. I do a lot of flicks, and if I don't stretch, I get really bad tennis elbow.
Oh yeah.
And so back in the day, man, I used to play 36 holes a day. I used to go out, play 18 twice a day. And after a while, I discovered that I was struggling to get through 18 because my elbow was hurting so bad. But I figured out that if I stretched real good before I started, that my elbow wouldn't hurt and I could play 36 holes, and that was when the light switch flipped, and I realized that, oh my gosh, there is some value in this stretching. And so ever since then, I started stretching before I blow glass, and same thing, makes a huge, huge difference. And glass blowing is one of those things where if you are not perfect, like if you are at all hungry, tired, upset, cranky, sad, anything, you're going to make garbage. Like, you really have to have everything perfect for you to be able to blow glass to the best of your abilities, and stretching is a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, man, I can't tell you how many times I've had the conversation. We need to talk about this after I'm done working today, please.
Right. Yeah. Like, look, I'm trying to have a good day on the torch here. Don't fuck that up.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. It was good talking to you. Again, hang on. I'll do our little goodbyes, and we'll say goodbye off the air here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hope you all enjoyed this conversation with Quinn and getting our interviews back on schedule. And which I'm excited about here. Not we're in fucking December. I can't believe it. It's crazy. 2020 at that, almost 2021. So that being said, I'll have all of Quinn's links all in the show notes for you guys. You can check his workout and stay in touch. And again, any questions you have about stock markets and investing and all that kind of shit, contact your local professionals. They are very affordable. A lot of them will actually give you advice for free. And sometimes they do it for free and they just get a little percentage on what they make on what you're making, basically, kind of thing. But that being said, it's affordable. Get your shit together, be legit, and get 2020 started off, or 2021, I should say, started off on the right foot. Even though we're in the middle of this fucking pandemic, there's no reason for you not to get your shit together. Now is the best time. I think this year, dude, I don't know about you, but this time I've seen a lot of people that have been kind of resetting their lives and finding their passions that they've had hidden away for so long, and they got a chance to stay home because they're forced to, kind of reinvent themselves. So hopefully you're doing that out there yourself. So until next time, thanks again for tuning in. Make sure you leave us a review on iTunes if you have an Apple Podcast you're listening to this on. And if you don't, you can still go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Every little bit helps. I do greatly appreciate it. Check us out on Patreon. Our group is growing slowly. We have a fun little community on there. There's no trolling, no bullshit. We are just all legit. We're starting coaching calls and classes and video tutorials. All kind of good stuff going on there, sharing the knowledge. And you can find that at patreon.com/wiseguy radio. I'll have the link in the show notes for that. And until then, we'll see you on the next episode. Love you so much. Take it easy. Peace.